Okay, I'm not going to beat around the bush with this one. Life Force is one insane movie. This science fiction horror movie is freaking nuts, and I love every lunatic second of it. Released in 1985 and directed by horror movie legend Toby Hooper, Life Force tells the story of a space shuttle called the Churchill, discovering an alien spacecraft carrying 3 alien beings who look like humans. The beings are brought back to England, where one of them wakes up and runs amok, causing great chaos and destruction, as these aren't any old aliens, but space vampires, who seduce their prey and suck their life force out of their victims, reducing them to decaying zombie-like beings. It's up to the human characters to put a stop to this deadly threat, with the entire world at stake, in this unique movie produced by the Canon Film Group. Because of course it was. And as the movie's poster declares, in the blink of an eye, the terror begins. Which is a very accurate description for Life Force, because just like that, the movie goes from 0 to 11 with no going back. So let's explore this cuckoo banana bread movie by looking into 10 things that you didn't know about Life Force. Let's check it out. Number 10, based on a book. Life Force is based on the 1976 novel appropriately named The Space Vampires. It was written by English writer Colin Wilson, who was a frequent writer of true crime and the paranormal. The Space Vampires was actually Wilson's 51st book, and just like the movie, its basic plot involves a race of vampiric beings being discovered in a spacecraft, where they are brought back to Earth, where they unleash a reign of terror, and seduce their victims before sucking the life force out of them. Wilson was apparently heavily influenced by the works of H.P. Lovecraft when it came to writing The Space Vampires. Now, there are several differences between the book and movie, namely the time settings. In Life Force, the story is set in 1985, the year the movie was made, whereas the book is set in the late 21st century. And unlike the movie, which focuses on Halley's Comet, in the original book it was an asteroid belt. The book was a mild success among its release, nothing too spectacular, but obviously it still caught enough attention to get a movie version. Number 9, From Aliens to Vampires. Life Force was co-written by the great Dan O'Bannon, who really needs no introduction in the world of science fiction, as he had previously written the science fiction horror masterpiece Alien in 1979. In fact, the same year that O'Bannon wrote Life Force, he also wrote The Return of the Living Dead. The irony being that both movies are honestly pretty insane, in an addictively fun kind of way. I like to think that he was writing both movies simultaneously at the same time. Incidentally, Toby Hooper was the original director on board to direct Return of the Living Dead, but he dropped out of that movie to direct Life Force instead. And it was while he was attached to Return of the Living Dead that he met Dan O'Bannon and asked him to write the script for Life Force. The script was co-written by fellow writer Dan Jacoby, and it seems the production had issues with the script, as script writers Michael Armstrong and Olaf Pooley were brought on board to do some uncredited rewrites. Sadly though, the original author, Colin Wilson, was not happy with how his story transpired onto film, citing it to be one of the worst movies that he ever saw. And Life Force's director, Toby Hooper, claimed that the movie looked great, but the screenplay let it down. I personally think the screenplay is fine. I mean, yeah, it's a little schlock, but I always got the feeling that that is what they were going for. Dan O'Bannon, after Life Force, would also go on to write Total Recall for good measure. Number 8, Canon Films changed the title in an attempt for box office glory. At the time Life Force went into production, Canon Films were really hungry to make a box office hit. At the time, the production company had great financial struggles due to releasing a string of flops, along with their reputation for making cheesy exploitation movies on the cheap, with all kinds of dodgy practices supposedly going on behind the scenes. Canon wanted to start making big hits and to be taken seriously as a movie production company, where its founders, Joran Globus and Menachem Golem, threw $25 million into Life Force's production, which for Canon was a very high, expensive budget. Other movies that Canon were working on at that time, which would also have increased budgets, included Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, the Masters of the Universe movie, and Over the Top, the truck-driving, arm-wrestling Sylvester Stallone movie, because God knows we don't have enough of them. All four of these movies would actually lead to Canon's demise, thanks to all four of them being box office flops. But it wasn't through a lack of trying. Originally, Life Force went under the title The Space Vampires, the same name as the book that it was based on. However, Canon were worried that the name Space Vampires may hurt the public image of the movie, and that people may think that it was just another cheesy B-grade Canon film. So they changed the title to Life Force, hoping that the title will give the movie more intelligence and credibility among movie audiences. I can see where they were coming from. I mean, The Space Vampires does kind of sound like maybe it's paying homage to 1950s B-monster movies. Maybe. Number 7. Life Force was the start of a series of Toby Hooper-directed Canon movies. Toby Hooper was without a doubt a horror movie maestro, having directed the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the Salem's Lot miniseries. However, in 1982, he teamed up with Steven Spielberg to direct Poltergeist, which he may or may not have been the true director of, depending on which story you want to follow with that situation. However, after Poltergeist, Hooper went off the radar and didn't direct another movie, not until Life Force in 1985. In fact, Life Force was the first movie in a 3-picture deal that Hooper made with Canon Films, a trilogy of Toby Hooper Canon movies, if you will. The two movies that Hooper directed for Canon after Life Force was Invaders from Mars in 1986, the completely overlooked science fiction horror remake of the 1953 movie of the same name, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, also released in 1986, which completely flopped upon its release as people at the time couldn't figure out that the movie was a tongue-in-cheek spoof. I think out of the 3 movies, Life Force is definitely the better film. Yeah, it's over the top, but it grabs your attention. Hooper had often spoken about Life Force several times, as it seemed to be a movie that he really liked discussing. Hooper himself thought that the movie's title should have stayed as The Space Vampires, feeling that it's a better name than Life Force. As he explains, the title of Space Vampires would have made people, quote, look at the movie with a completely different set of sunglasses. And I know all about sunglasses, trust me. Yeah, but anyway, jokes aside, this just makes me wonder if there were 2 different visions going on in the production as to what Life Force should be. Canon Films, who wanted to make a serious science fiction thriller, and Toby Hooper, who saw it as being fun B-movie science fiction schlock. Number 6. Casting maybes. With the movie being filmed in Britain, Life Force features quite a few old-school British actors turning up throughout the film, including the legendary Patrick Stewart, who, as we all know, would go on to play Picard a few years later in Star Trek. Peter Firth, who is probably more recently best known for starring in the British spy series Spooks. Michael Gothard, who previously starred as the Bond villain Locke in For Your Eyes Only. Aubrey Morris, who previously starred as the creepy youth worker in A Clockwork Orange, as well as American actor Steve Railsback, who starred as the main lead role of Colonel Tom Carlson. And not forgetting, of course, French actress Mathilda May, who played the main space vampire, simply credited as Space Girl. During the time of filming, May couldn't speak a word of English, and spent most of the movie's shoot in her birthday suit. And despite only having a total of 7 minutes on screen, she still has a lasting impact, and even carries the movie, even if she isn't carrying any underpants. But what about the casting that nearly took place but didn't? Well, classical English actor John Gielgud was offered a role in the film for a large sum of money, but his fee then dropped and he was like, yeah, nah, no thanks. The most interesting casting misfire comes in the form of 80s pop star Billy Idol, who claimed that Toby Hooper approached him to star as one of the vampires, but Idol couldn't take Hooper up on the offer as he was too busy touring at that time. It kinda reminds me of when Billy Idol was originally envisioned to play the T-1000 in Terminator 2. However, the vampires do have a rock/pop music connection of sorts, as one of the male vampires was played by Chris Jagger, the brother of Mick Jagger. Yep, we've got a vampire who moves like Jagger. Well, at least one of them anyway. And trust me, I know that as a fact. I read it on Wikipedia. Number 5. The special effects of life force and vegetables. Say what you want to say about life force, one thing you can't deny is the special effects seen in the movie are pretty spectacular. Even though some of them might seem dated now, you can tell that in 1985, some of these visuals were pretty groundbreaking. The effects in Life Force were produced by special effects movie wizard John Dykstra, who was one of the co-founders of Industrial Light and Magic, as he worked on the special effects for the original Star Wars, as well as Battlestar Galactica. Dykstra even won an award for his work in Life Force, which was well deserved. In the climax of the movie, when we see London being destroyed, a miniature town from an abandoned theme park in Dorset in the UK was actually used as a stand-in for the shots of London. And the alien spaceship seen in the movie was actually designed after an artichoke. Yeah, a plain old artichoke. I guess the moral of the story is that if you need to design a spaceship but stuck on ideas, then just go and look at some vegetables for inspiration. Number 4. Toby Hooper nearly lost an ear. So as mentioned, Life Force was filmed in the UK, mainly around Christchurch and Hampshire, with studio filming taking place at Elstree Studio, which is just near London. The shoot was supposedly only meant to last for 17 weeks, but ended up taking up 22 weeks to film. Bill Mallon, who played one of the vampires, claimed that Life Force went so over schedule, important scenes that were meant to be shot never ended up being filmed. Malin also supposedly claimed that at one stage the production of Life Force had temporarily shut down entirely, as the movie had run out of money. But if that's true, then that's still the least of Toby Hooper's worries, as filming in England could get so cold it almost affected his health, as after lengthy shoots on the cold British moors, Hooper nearly lost an ear due to frostbite. Yeah, yikes, not cool. Thankfully Hooper got to keep his ear, and make a full recovery. But yeah, Life Force nearly cost a famous horror director his ear. I guess the fact that Hooper got to keep his ear was very irresistible for him. See that? See what I did there? Number 3. Change in musical score. Remember how I said that Canon Films pretty much threw everything and the kitchen sink into Life Force in order to make it a true blockbuster hit of epic proportions? Well, nowhere is this more evident than with the movie's score, as they got the legendary Henry Mancini to score the movie. For those who don't know, Mancini composed the iconic Pink Panther theme, as well as scoring other movies such as Breakfast at Tiffany's, Charade, and Santa Claus the Movie. Oh wow, he did that too. Originally, James Horner was asked to score the film, as he was getting acclaim at that time for scoring the Star Trek movies. However, Mancini agreed to score Life Force when he read the original script, which explained that the first 15 minutes had no dialogue, in a lengthy scene that was just exploring the alien spacecraft. Mancini got excited about this, feeling that he could create a space ballad, probably similar to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Mancini's score for the movie is great. It sounds haunting and mysterious, and goes with the eerie atmosphere of the movie. However, last-minute changes had to be made to the score for the movie's US release, where fellow movie composer Michael Kamen and recording engineer James Guthrie were asked to compose some additional musical cues and themes to be added into the movie. Kamen was a big-time movie composer himself, having scored action movies like Lethal Weapon and Die Hard, and Guthrie was a musician best known for working with the British rock group Pink Floyd. I'm not sure why additional music had to be created at the last minute for the American release, but my guess is probably to add a bit more life and punch into the score, but hey, that's just a guess. Number 2. The Toby Hooper cut. The original cut of Life Force, otherwise known as the Toby Hooper cut, clocked in at 128 minutes long. The theatrical cut of Life Force was taken down to just over 100 minutes. Most of the scenes that were cut involved scenes on the Churchill spacecraft at the start of the movie. Originally, the Churchill scenes were a whopping 35 minutes long, and it was just felt that too much of the movie was taking place in the movie's setup. So chunks of that scene were cut down to get the ball rolling, and to get the movie setup done faster at a swifter pace, to get the main focus of the movie swiftly off the ground. There are also supposedly entire characters that were removed from the final film, as well as additional scenes that were considered too violent or too sexually explicit. After all, the production of Life Force was going all out to avoid an X rating. Some parts of the world did get a cut of the movie with additional scenes that were not seen in the US version. This was known as the international cut and clocked in at 116 minutes. Finally, the international cut of Life Force was made available commercially by MGM for a Laserdisc release in 1994, and then for a DVD release during the 2000s. It took a long time to get some of these additional scenes for Life Force, but hey, we got there eventually. But the international cut aside, there are still over 10 minutes of unaccountable footage from the original Toby Hooper cut. I wonder if we will ever see those lost scenes. Number 1. The Life Force of the big screen. Life Force was released in June 1985, and it had one major opponent which prevented it from getting those blockbuster big bucks, and that was none other than the movie Cocoon. Yep, the Ron Howard movie that featured nice aliens. Not ones that are sexy vampires that seduce you and suck your life force out of you. So with these two movies going toe-to-toe in the box office, Life Force was just no match for the more commercially friendly Cocoon. After all, if E.T.'s box office battle with The Thing taught us anything, that is, in the 80s, people wanted nice aliens and not mean ones. Life Force would only go on to make $11 million at the box office, not even recouping its $25 million budget, which is just a travesty, as Life Force deserved so much more than that. Without a doubt, the movie was way better than its box office numbers dictated. The movie also got torn apart by critics, because of course it did, with it being labelled as silly, ridiculous, and completely crazy. Still, Gene Siskel seemed to have liked it, describing it as a guilty pleasure. Everyone seemed to agree that the movie was loud, bombastic, over the top, and completely insane. But I think that's one of the movie's strengths. It's absolutely bonkers and is really over the top, and that makes it stand out and be more memorable. I mean, Life Force sticks out in my memory way more than Cocoon does. Life Force was never going to be a movie that the critics liked, but that's okay. That doesn't stop it from being an enjoyable movie, be that an insanely enjoyable movie. It is silly and schlock, but I feel like the movie is like that by design. I always feel like Life Force almost has a comic book vibe about it, while paying homage to 1950s alien invasion movies. Life Force is a movie unlike any other, so if you choose to watch it, buckle up, because you're in for one bonkers, out-of-this-world movie experience, but an experience that lasts with you for a long time. I think that Life Force is Canon Films done right, when they actually care about the movie and put a lot of time and money and effort into the production. And I think it's a shame that the movie failed at the box office, because had it been a hit, who knows, maybe we would have gotten more Canon Films like Life Force. And maybe the company would have even been around a bit longer, who knows? It's definitely worth a viewing if you haven't seen it before, or a reviewing if you have seen it but haven't seen it in a while. At the end of the day, it's just a really entertaining film, be that a completely weird one. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I'm off to observe some vegetables so I can design a spaceship. Gotta love Canon. See ya!